What's this? Is this a dream? My mother was a very busy woman. The harder she worked, the more her work was valued, and she kept getting promoted. She fought to go higher and higher. She was always shining, and she was my hero. My mother started her career as a fashion designer at a small clothing factory in Oknemia. This is a track I don't think we've heard before. My father was a designer too. They met for their jobs and soon got married. They lived in a small apartment in Oknemia, but they moved to my grandma's house, our current house, in Hidemizawa when she got pregnant with me. We lived there until right before I went to elementary school. When I think about it, that was the happiest time of my life. Why, even happier than now? I felt happy every day and believed without a doubt that tomorrow would be the same. I was so happy that I took it for granted and didn't even feel the happiness. I really did feel happy every day. I was small at the time and didn't really understand what was going on, but it seemed like the company my parents were working for was having financial difficulties. So my mother and a few other young designers started talking about leaving the company and going independent. After many things happened and the situation grew complicated, they got an offer to work in a big design firm in Ibaraki, and they took the offer. At that time, I heard my mother saying many difficult words like limited partnership and business alliance, but in short, what she wanted to do was move to Ibaraki. My mother and her peers were hired because their talent and experience made them immediate assets at their new company. However, my father wasn't one of them. Unfortunately, my father wasn't as talented as my mother was, so moving to Ibaraki meant that my father had to give up being a fashion designer. My mother's new company had high expectations of her talent and promised her responsible projects. She didn't want to waste her growing talent and passion by living in a rural town like Hidemizawa. So my mother convinced my father to quit his job and move to Ibaraki to support her and to help her build her career. Back then, moving meant that I had to say goodbye to my close friends. I didn't want to move, and I kept crying about it. That's one thing, isn't it, when it comes to stuff like that, is when, like, someone's job becomes a point where they have to move somewhere else. It's like if they have a kid, the kid has to say goodbye to the place they grew up in, essentially. I had best friends when I was growing up, that had a similar thing there, where he moved away because I think one of his parents got a job elsewhere. It's one of those things, you know, it has an impact. After we moved to Ibaraki, my father was a big success. Mother, I mean, not the father. Not only did she have great leadership skills, she was full of energy, and I believe she made the best use of her talents to succeed. She came home late every night and barely had any days off. When she had a big project, she often stayed entire nights at her office. But when she came home, she always looked fulfilled and wore a happy smile that she had never worn when she was in Hidemizawa. She was shining, and I remember I always wanted to shine like her when I grew up. On the other hand, my father wasn't doing so well. This shape reminds me of Dark Apple 2. If you saw my LP of that, at one point I'd when they were doing that, you know, haunted kind of thing where it's just like, oh, mysterious, creepy events of wherever the school was called, ooh, and I came up with my own little ghost story called The Mysterious Mask, but I drew a mask, sort of, in Manga Studio, I think it was, and just made this weird looking mask that was pretty much in this kind of shape. I remember that. He couldn't find a job as a fashion designer, so he took a clerical job at a small company. They kept changing positions. He couldn't use the experience that he had cultivated, and it was very hard for him. But he was very understanding. He started to take care of things around the house for my mother, who got busier and busier, having one project after another. You can probably see where this is all leading. He cleared the house, did the laundry, and came to my school events. However, he couldn't cook. He did cook rice, but always bought side dishes from a grocery store. And this is also starting to, build up something as well, isn't it? Starting to make things start to make sense. We interrupt my mother more and more often. I guess she's busy again. Every time I said that, he always told me, your mother is working very hard, so let's support her, Rena. That was what he always told me. When did she start being called Rena? Was that when she moved back to Enemizawa? Was it like Mayon that gave her the nickname? Possibly. I decided to help my father with the cooking. I thought it was a good idea to learn how to cook since he wasn't good at it. Actually, it might have even been Rena herself. I think this story might be leading to the origin of that if we hadn't already heard it before. But it was a good idea to learn how to cook since he wasn't good at it. And there we have it! The origin of how Rena is such a good cook. Whenever my mother cooked, I helped her and tried to learn how to cook from her. She apologized for not having enough time to cook for us, but she was happy that I was learning. I think I wrote in my school yearbook that I wanted to be a clothing designer in the future, just like my mother. But apparently I lacked my mother's exceptional sense of style. She used to tell me, taste is something that you're born with, not something that you cultivate. I remember I was discouraged to be a designer because of that. That was why I decided to reach her by getting better at things she wasn't so good at, instead of trying to be like her. I wanted to be good, not only at cooking, but also at doing things around the house, such as cleaning, doing the laundry, and grocery shopping. I remember my father was really happy that I did all of that for him, because he wasn't good at it at all. He couldn't find a job and spent a lot of time at home, so he seemed to enjoy spending time doing the housework with his daughter more than anything. I started to become better and better at filling in for my mother, and she started to get too busy to do any of the housework at all, and she moved on to a more reasonable position at her job. She took me out to many places, as if to compensate for leaving me alone all the time. She used to say, let's go eat something delicious without telling your father, and took me out to a restaurant. She took me to high-class restaurants and amusement parks. Sometimes it was only me and my mother, sometimes it was her friends from work. She took me to a beach barbecue one summer with those friends. I was introduced as her daughter and every one of them pampered me. I still remember there was this one guy who particularly doted on me. He was a good-looking young man. I called him Uncle once and he got mad at me. He was nicely tanned with dyed brown hair. This young man often came with us when we went out. When my mother took me somewhere, she usually made several phone calls for her work during the day. Sometimes she took me out to a place where she could also do her work at the same time. So I didn't feel awkward when people from her work came with us. But I would prefer to be alone with her, so I was happy when we could do that. One day she took me to a very high-end part of town. Of course, she always spoiled me whenever we went out. She bought me things and let me eat whatever I wanted. But she especially spoiled me on that day. She took me to many expensive-looking boutiques and accessory stores. She was about to buy me something, but I told her not to get it because it didn't look good on me. That hesitation, she bought it anyway. I remember there were many zeros on the price tag. On that day I realized my mother's design work had made her a very successful woman, and she was earning a lot of money. We took a break at a ridiculously expensive looking restaurant that probably charged 1,000 yen for a glass of orange juice. That's ridiculous! Now, when it comes to fancy restaurants where it's like, even the simplest things cost a lot, it's just like, that's just branding that is, isn't it? Just like, you motherfuckers, I could just go over the street and get that for like, maybe 100 yen or something, maybe even less. But I gotta pay 1,000 yen for a glass of orange juice? Like 1,000 yen, right? How much is 1,000 yen in pounds? So I think it's like the equivalent of a £10 note, but not quite. It's probably a bit less than that. But still, that's outrageous price if there's orange juice for 1,000 yen. My mother clapped her hands and spoke to me with a smile on her face. She asked, Rena, would you like to make your dream come true? When I was in kindergarten, my teacher gave students a topic to draw a picture of. The topic was my dream, and I drew myself eating a mountain of fruit buffet all by myself. This thing, it's like, with a subject like that, very broad, isn't it? It's like, write down your dream. If I've always explain what is just like, not simply just like, what would you like to do in the future? More of just, what is your dream? Somebody draws a horrific picture. It's like, my God, what is this? Just like, Like you said, dream. I thought you include nightmares as well. This is the nightmare I had last night. It's like, my God, kids, why would you draw this? It's like, well, you said dream. What my mother meant to say was that she was going to make that dream come true for me. It was a normal day. You know, I find that kind of fitting. It's just like after, you know, that eating contest they did at Angel Moon, it's just like, her dream came true again many years later. It was a normal day. It wasn't my birthday or anything. But since my mother always spoiled me when we went out together, I didn't feel awkward about it at all, and I accepted her offer with a happy smile. There were 5 or 6 fruit buffets in front of me. I remember it looked exactly like the world I drew, and I felt like I was floating in that dream world. It was too much for us to finish, but we dug our spoons into it as if we were playing in the mud, and we really enjoyed eating it together. It was my first time to experience getting full by eating only fruit buffets, and I remember I was very happy. I enjoyed tasting the happiness and chatting with my mother. Rena-chan, do you remember the man who went to the movie and had dinner with us last time? Are you talking about Uncle Akihito? Oh no, I don't call him that or he's going to hit me. Rena-chan, do you like Akihito-san? Can you see where this is going? I hate him, he always teases me. That's because he likes you. You get along well with him at the barbecue. Well, I get along with him every now and then. Every now and then. So even back then, she repeats her sentences. Like, when she ends a sentence, she just repeats it. My mother laughed. I didn't know why she brought up the subject. Well, I certainly do. Because it's obvious. Even if I hadn't read this before all those years ago, it's very obvious where this is all leading. But I didn't really pay attention to it because I was too young. When I think about it, she was breaking the news. Yep. I just didn't notice it. Rena-chan, who do you like better, your father or me? What kind of parent asks that question? Just like, hey, do you like me, your mother better, or your father? I mean, flip it around. You have 2 kids, just like, which do you like better of your 2 kids? You can't make a decision like that. You. And she actually answered. It wasn't that I hated my father or anything, but I thought giving her that answer was appropriate after she spoiled me so much. If I said I'm going to live in another house away from your father, which of us would you go to live with? Huh? I'm thinking about divorcing your father and getting married to Akihito-san. She's been cheating on the poor man. And that makes it even more tragic, really, isn't it? Like, the father pretty much gave up his job so that she could pursue her dreams. And what'd she do? She makes it very far in the business world, finds a much more attractive looking guy probably, and it's like, you know what, just like, you're gonna like have an affair and then just like, oh, I'm thinking of just divorcing the guy who gave up his own dreams to make my dreams a reality. Fuck him. And then just going with a better one now. So how do you think Rena's gonna take this news? At that time, my mother was a very successful woman. I didn't know this at the time, but she was drafted by a headhunter to work at a bigger company, where she was promoted to a higher and more responsible position, one where she could bring out the most of her talents. Of course, the position wasn't the only thing she gained. Compared to my father's low salary, my mother was earning enough money to support a family of 3 and still have some left over. I'd kind of realized it from the way she spent money. The greater position she achieved, the more she spent time with people at her level. So she's become snotty as well, probably. All of them were bright and talented. Compared to them, my father might have looked unattractive to her. I liked Uncle Akihito, but I liked him as one of my mother's friends, not the same way I liked my father. I liked my father and mother equally, so it was very shocking to me that my mother wanted to divorce him. I felt as if the ground below me was beginning to crack. That expression, I realized, actually fit my situation very well. I had to choose which side of the cracked ground I wanted to stand on. My mother told me to live with her at her new house. Her new house meant the house Uncle Akihito lived in. I thought a house was a sanctuary for a family. I believed that a house was a holy place where strangers couldn't easily enter. That was why I couldn't believe her. How could she let a stranger invade such a holy place so easily? Why do you hate my father? My mother looked down and didn't answer. I asked her another question. Why can't you stay with my father? I think that was the hardest and the most heartbreaking of all questions for my mother to answer. In short, my mother had cheated on him. She loved another man who was more attractive than my father. It was just that and nothing more. All on looks. I knew more than anybody that it was my father's fault. Probably that, and obviously, probably a lot more, wealthy, maybe have more skills. First of all, he decided to move from Inamizawa to support my mother as much as he could. For him, nothing good had come from that. Actually, I think he had a very tough time since we moved to Ibaraki. But he volunteered to be her support and tried very hard to do that. I thought my mother appreciated his support. So, I took her decision as a betrayal. I told her that I disagreed with everything, including their divorce. I said it very loudly and made everybody in the store jump. Sure, continue your relationship with Uncle Akihito, but don't divorce my father. I feel bad for him. I feel terrible for him. He has been doing nothing but support you patiently this whole time. How could you do such a cruel thing to him? I screamed as loud as I could. Then my mother answered, It's too late. Why? You haven't talked to my father about this, have you? It's not too late. I'm pregnant. Oh, it's worse. So Rena probably, I don't think we ever see that, but Rena probably has like a half sibling then. This is taking place in the past, but I don't think we see her half sibling. I don't know whether my mother actually told him about the divorce in person. A middle-aged woman who called herself a lawyer came to the house several times to talk to my father on my mother's behalf. She sometimes called him too. My father begged the lawyer to let him speak directly to my mother many times, but it never happened. So she didn't even have... What nerve! You didn't even go up to his face and say this shit. You don't have... Well, balls. Well, that makes sense, but I mean balls as in, having the guts to say it to his face. I could tell by the way they talked that he had no clue when my mother told him she wanted a divorce. Well, again, I'm not even sure if she told him in person. The lawyer told him not to meet my mother, and not to call her at work, and many other things too. To top it all off, she told him not to see my mother ever again. That's just freaking horrible. He wanted to talk to her. He called some of their mutual friends, but he only found out the name of the guy she was having an affair with, and nothing more. He asked me, "Do you know the guy?" I told him, "I do." I also told him that he was a funny guy and had given me candy many times. I'll never forget how he looked when I told him that. God damn, that's tragic. He hit me for the first time. Oh shit. He hit me so hard that his handprint stayed on my cheek for a while. Then he fell on the floor and cried loudly. And then I started to cry too. I didn't cry because he hit me. Uncle Akihito was kind to me, so I liked him and talked to him out of courtesy. No, that wasn't it. Girls had to be kind to everybody. That's what I thought. But I was wrong. I learned in this world that there are people you should be nice to, and enemies you shouldn't be nice to. The enemies are the ones who would destroy my life with their very existence. Whether they mean to harm me or not doesn't matter. They're like weeds growing on a flower bed. Dandelions are innocent, but they take all of the nutrition for the tulips from the soil. That's why we have to pull them out. Dandelions did nothing wrong, but they're the enemy. Enemies are bad people. That guy was a bad person. I shouldn't have accepted him. I should have rejected him with everything I had. By doing so, I might have been able to disrupt their relationship. Well, she wouldn't have known what was going down. By doing so, I might have been able to make my mother feel like their relationship was not going to work. If I tried to do so, my parents would have had to break up. Wouldn't have, or whatever. My father and I cried together, but we cried for different reasons. He must have cried because it happened so fast and didn't make any sense to him. I cried because I regretted that I let it happen when I had a chance to prevent it. My father stroked my cheek and opened his mouth to apologize, but he couldn't speak and just cried with me. One day the lawyer let me see my mother. My mother asked me to live with her at her house again. I didn't know what to say, so I just kept looking down and listened to her apologies. My father knew that I was going to see my mother on that day, so he handed me a letter and told me to give it to her. I don't know what he wrote in that letter, but for some reason I was able to imagine what kind of things he wrote when I felt it through the envelope. After all, the letter inside the envelope had a rough surface. He must have been crying while writing the letter, and his tears made the letter all wrinkled when dried. My mother took the letter from me, told me that she'd read it later, and was about to put it in her bag. I'm sure she would. I stopped her and told her to read it there. I wanted to see how she was going to take the last words that my father had left her. But my mother didn't read it. She told me she wanted to read it alone later, and she put it in her bag. At that time, I realized, no, it was more than that. I should say, I knew, because it was so obvious. I knew that my mother was lying. She had no intention of reading my father's letter. She was going to throw it away after I was gone, but she lied just because she wanted to seem like a nice person in front of me. The slight curl in her eyebrows and lips told me that more clearly than anything else. That moment, I finally knew something else. The guy she was having an affair with wasn't the only bad person. My mother was also a bad person. Since that moment, the existence of my mother disappeared from my world like dry ice evaporating. I didn't have to hesitate about whom to live with anymore. I don't want to go to your house. The Ryukyu house is my home. I don't want to see you anymore. Please don't even call me. But Rena, if you live with your father, you won't have... At that moment, I hated my name for the first time in my life. Yeah, that's where... Why, that's right there. So I should drop the E, probably. Please don't call me Rena ever again. I have to go now. Goodbye. Those were my last words to my mother. No, to the woman who used to be my mother. After that, I spent many days without feeling anything. I didn't know if the days were long or short. I didn't know which season I was living in. It was supposed to be nothing out of the ordinary, not having my mother around. But every time my father saw things that reminded him of her, like her toothbrush, her teacup, or her favorite books, he shed tears which left me frustrated. I suppose that's another frustrating thing about that, isn't it? Like, he's ended up a broken man from this, but she's... probably the only thing that phases her is that her daughter has turned against her from all this. That's probably the only thing that has any impact on her for this, because she's already over her father long ago. So I decided to completely remove her belongings from the house. I roughly threw her things into a black trash bag. I started to do so frantically. By the time I knocked down her wardrobe, threw her music box hard on the floor, and broke her mirror, my mind was already not working properly. When I tried to remember what happened after that, I feel disorientated. It's because the pills the doctor gave me back then made me feel disorientated and lethargic every time I took them. And it all goes back to that, isn't it? It kind of makes sense, really, if you've been paying attention, sort of. Why has that been explained yet? I know. You're just like, what are you talking about? No, I won't explain anything further than that. Because, be spoilers. It seems that dullness hit me especially hard. Since every time I try to remember that time, it makes me feel disorientated and lethargic, just like the pills made me feel. I destroyed everything that smelled like my mother. But the thing I wanted to destroy the most might have been myself. Even after I threw all of her belongings away, I still couldn't stop feeling regret, and decided to blame myself in the end. You know, it's like, that's probably a common thing for kids where their parents get divorced, is to blame themselves for it. Just like, that must be a horrible feeling. Maybe I was thinking that I wanted to do damage to her reputation of successful life by destroying her daughter, destroying myself. When I was about to reach that very last resolution, oyashiro-sama came to me. When it began, that first fateful encounter, oyashiro-sama told me to go back to Hinamizawa. Yes, all of this was because of his curse. Did she even know about the curse? Come to think of it, this happened years ago, before all that. Was there always that kind of like, oyashiro-sama has a curse even though it hasn't affected anyone yet kind of thing? Or maybe it did. Because if you think about it, we don't know how old Rena is in this point in time here. And the curse is like, it had like 3 or 4 years before the main plot. And Rena's about like 15 or something like that, I think she is. So she's probably like in her pre-teens or something like this at this point in time, maybe. So maybe the curse has already begun. But is it really? Maybe not. But ooh, how mysterious. Oyashiro-sama brought a curse upon the Ryugu family because we broke his rule and abandoned Hinamizawa. Then why did it take his time? I mean, how long were they living in Ibaraki before this? After I figured that out, everything started to make sense to me. All the crazy things that happened after my mother was gone. The curse of Oyashiro-sama did all that to us. It was Oyashiro-sama's voice that was telling us to come back to Hinamizawa. That's right. You should have stayed in Hinamizawa. Everything went crazy because we moved. We had to go back to Hinamizawa. I started feeling disoriented again, and a dull pain ran through my head. It might be a scream from within me telling me not to push myself too hard to remember any further. The house where we used to live in Hinamizawa was still there. My grandma already passed away, and the house was the only property she left for us. I remembered that I used to live in Hinamizawa, but all I remembered was that it was a village that I used to live in until right before I went to elementary school. I remember the atmosphere of the village too, but that was all I remembered. I forgot the streets and even the names of close friends I used to play with. The neighbors knew that the son of the deceased woman had come back divorced. Wait, what? Neighbors knew that the son of the deceased woman came back divorced. Huh? But they didn't know us, and we didn't know them. So it was almost like we moved to a new place. Just knew that the son of a deceased woman had come back to the house. Who are they referring to there? If they're referring to Rena's father, then that's not true, because the mother isn't deceased. However, as far as I was concerned, it still was my hometown that I had to come back to. First, everything was inconvenient compared to life in Ibaraki. It was hard for both of us to adjust. But we renovated the old house, and it was only me and my father. Life here seemed to make my father forget his pain from the divorce. Michan was very kind to me, and I started to get used to my new life too. So it's probably me on then, I guess. That was the first one to, exchange a hand. Just like, hey, wanna hang out? I'm Mayon Sorzaki. What's your name? Let's be friends. Wanna join this club I'm gonna start up? Come to think of it, didn't she? Yeah, she might have even had the club already at that point. Possibly. I think she might have, yeah, before Rena moved back. I did everything around the house, and we gradually went back to a time when we used to live happily. Wait a second. Well, thinking about it, yeah, this would have had to, the curse have had to have struck a few years, because, as Rena's pointed out before, the year prior to Keiichi moving to Hinamizawa, which is the year the plot takes place in, is the year where she moved back to Hinamizawa. So she'd be about like 14 or something at that time. Yeah. Just like, so that took place in the, the whole plot takes place in the early 80s. It's like trying to think of a timeline here, is it? It's like, what year did these events take place? I think it's 1983, I think the plot takes place in, or is it 84? One of the two. I did everything around the house, and we gradually went back to a time when we used to live happily. Anybody can live a happy life. People sometimes say that some people are born to be unhappy. I believe that's just an excuse for people who don't even want to try. I won't give in to fate. I'll never give up trying to recapture the happy times that I lost. I'm going to become happy to the point where I don't even feel the happiness anymore. And this all explains her outlook on life, being, trying to be happy and not think of the negatives. I'm not going to cry anymore. I'll never cry again. I used up all my tears on that night my father hit me. The curse of oyashiro-sama is over because we came back to Nimizawa. So I'm going to have a happy life from now on. And then she finally woke up. All of a sudden, big raindrops hit the roof of the car and I recovered my senses. It was still raining hard. It had already gotten dark outside. The shadows the table lamp created were very dark, and it looked as if there's nothing else around me. If I turned off this light, would everything in this world disappear? I turned off the lights. Darkness swallowed me, but the cold air and the sound of rain didn't change a bit, and it made me realize I was still in this world. The curse of oyashiro-sama. Did the curse of oyashiro-sama do those crazy things to my family? Or did I convince myself it did as an excuse for myself, because I didn't want to feel guilty about the divorce? Sometimes I'm not sure. Since that time, oyashiro-sama hasn't come to me. I sometimes feel like I was delusional, like I created because I was mentally ill. But he did come at that time. I'm sure about that. Am I right, oyashiro-sama? I was unhappy after I left in Bizarro, but I came back and I'm happy now. But where am I supposed to go now that I'm unhappy in Bizarro? Where? Oh? Stop it, Ren. Don't think that you're unhappy. I am happy. I will be happy. I can definitely be happy. Suddenly I felt that if this darkness swallowed me, I'd never be able to be happy again. I found the switch of the table lamp and turned it back on. When I looked at the clock, it was already past 11 p.m. Damn, that's pretty late. After I go home, I wouldn't have time to prepare my lunch for tomorrow. At least I'd have to set the timer on the rice cooker. It didn't look like the rain was going to stop anytime soon. I looked out of the window to see the rain, but could only see my reflection. I talked to that reflection in the window. I'm so glad my father's happy. He'd been acting like he was dead for a long time. The smile on his face is a good sign that he's regaining his former happy life. He became miserable because of me. That's why I don't mind doing things for him until he regains his smile and we become truly happy. When I stay here alone for a while, gives him some time to be alone with her. Plus I don't have to fake a smile. But then, my reflection in the window tells me, Rena, you're such a good girl. You're kind to everybody and love them equally. You can make anybody like you. But did you forget something? In this world there are people you should be kind to, and enemies that you have to reject with all you've got. I thought you learned that lesson. No, don't listen to her. My reflection is always mean. She always says mean things and makes fun of my worries. But she always tells me things that I can't say myself. Let's go home, Rena. To your home. Forget about the mean Rena in the mirror. I was a bit hungry by then. After all the desserts I ate, I still got hungry. I almost forgot. Rena-san brought me a shortcake. Yeah, that woman again comes into this. And there's kind of like, you can probably see what like the implications are in this situation. I've never had a shortcake from Angel Mort, but I bet it'll taste good. I'd have to give my thanks to Rina-san the next time I see her. Rina-san speaks in a way that makes it very clear how she grew up. But I'm sure she's a good person. That's because she's so good to my father. Yeah, she's dating her father. I did everything I could to make my father smile, but I failed. On the other hand, Rina-san put a big smile on his face so easily. I have to thank Rina-san. I have to thank her for cheering up my father. But I don't know why. I just don't like her perfume. Higurashi, when I cry, in the rain, Kai. Tips, a summer picture diary, rainy days are on their way. They're already there, mates. Don't call me Rena. She looks like the freaking Joker in that. Well, it's been an hour 40 minutes, so I wasn't expecting to record that long, but Rena's backstory for her parents there just kind of like caught my interest. As I'm sure it did you viewers as well, because that was That was something, wasn't it? Just like, we started off with just like mostly Keiichi's perspective. Everything's all fun and happy. Then goes to Rena's perspective, and there's this not really all that subtle kind of change in tone. And then we get the backstory, and it's like, oh damn, Rena. Damn. Shit. So yeah, what will happen next in the plot? I can't remember the pacing of the plot, so even I'm not 100% sure. But we will find out in the next part. So I'll see you next time, viewers. Next time.